Today, I'm talking to Sam Schwager, who's the CEO and co-founder of SuperDial. We seeded the business back in 2022. It was actually the first deal that I did at Slow, and have gotten to watch Sam and Harrison build for the last 3.5 years, which has been super fun. The pitch has always been really, really simple, which is we're going to use voice AI to automate a ton of pretty shit work that providers have to do with some really, really big ideas for what comes next. But crucially, Sam, you've got some news to break. Breaking. What do you have to say for yourself? What's going on in SuperDial?
That's right. Yeah, we're super excited to announce that we raised our Series A from Signal Fire. So that release is coming out soon officially. But we're extremely excited about them as a partner. The Series A process, got to talk to a lot of folks. It was clear the Signal Fire team was super deep on RCM. Had really, serious interest in the ability of AI to transform the industry. And we were just really enjoying working with their team and the advisor network that they have in place. We're one of the first investments out of their new $1 billion fund focused primarily on vertical AI, a lot of that being in healthcare. So really, really thrilled about this and have been able already to, scale up our team and just general presence in the market with this new capital.
Yeah, 12 million reasons to smile and show up to work every day. So maybe a cool place to start here is just, what does SuperDial actually do? We can talk about present, and then we can talk about past, and we can talk most importantly about future.
So SuperDial automates phone calls for healthcare organizations. So initially in the olden days, we're a revenue cycle management company ourselves called SuperBill. We were focused on, streamlining insurance reimbursement for specialty practices and their patients, especially in kind of the, out of network context. So think like out of network therapy, physical therapy. Anyways, we scaled that business up, but had to make tons of phone calls ourselves to the payers, the insurance companies, in that case to follow up on claims and check patient benefits. But became pretty clear to us early on that this, phone-based administrative work was a serious hindrance to a lot of healthcare orgs beyond our own. So we built an internal tool trying to automate these, calls for our own sake. Quickly realized that it was finally possible with the current state of AI, but extremely difficult to do well. So if we were going to productize that, we were going to need to focus exclusively and entirely on that offering. So we started going to conferences and talking with other, RCM companies, billing companies, to gauge their, appetite for that sort of a solution. And they were all kind of like, it'd be great if it were possible. And, got a lot of early interest in the product. Actually ended up signing our first customer. And that was a trigger, to us to end up discontinuing the billing business to focus entirely on SuperDial, the phone call automation business. So backing up a little, I mean, really what we're seeing is kind of this has been the case for a long time, but 25% of all healthcare spend goes to admin work. So that totals to, $1.2 trillion spent on administrative work, a lot of which is phone-based. And right now, the initial opportunity we target are these outbound phone calls to insurance carriers for revenue cycle management related tasks. So think benefits verification, prior authorization, claim follow-up. But over time, there are all sorts of different phone calls and adjacencies that we'd like to get into. And we're already fortunately trialing with a payer and very interested in working with the other side of these calls as well to facilitate AI to AI communication.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because there's a lot of companies trying to do some version of, AI call center, AI receptionist. Maybe first talk about like why what you're doing is actually so hard, because it's easy to say, oh, well, I don't know, we use AI to make some phone calls. That seems pretty easy. That doesn't feel like a company. And it took a really, really long time. It was really, really hard. So maybe talk about why that was so hard.
Yeah, so I mean, these are very nuanced, domain-specific calls where there's this significant phone pre-navigation step followed by long hold time, potentially transfers, and then I think 20, 30-minute plus conversation with a human at the insurance company to go through a lot of nuanced policy details, or to conduct a prior authorization or get into the line level details of an unpaid claim or denied claim even. So it's not the sort of thing that you package up in a weekend and make work. There are all sorts of workflow specific build outs against, our enterprise or larger customer needs, as well as, your system integrations. I think EHR and, practice management system integration. So fully productizing this in a way that is usable to the end customer, who for us right now is an RCM company or, healthcare provider. It takes a lot of last mile work and a lot of nuance in the way that you construct the voice agent itself. So that's a lot of the difficulty of creating something like this. We're AI realists at SuperDial. We've been this way from the start. We have a human fallback team that will step in to carry out transactions that the AI cannot complete. This goes back to our days of the billing company when we built this as an internal tool. Our goal was to handle as many of these calls using AI as we could, so that we could alleviate the burden on our own human team. So that was kind of our initial approach. And when we brought it to market, we kept doing that. We already had the human fallback team. We were kind of already building against that human agent teaming component. And it really resonated in the revenue cycle management industry, where a lot of the work, of course, currently is done by humans. So that's another
Yeah.
differentiator of SuperDial.
How does this all play out? Because it feels like, on the one hand, something kind of very like logical and ergonomic about phone calls, where like, hey, in healthcare, we're still using fax machines for a lot of communications simply because they're there. So look, we're going to have a voice agent do a phone call and talk to a human being on the other line because there's systems already set up for it. It's sort of like the humanoid robot equivalent in healthcare operations, but it's obviously like kind of dumb. Uh, you know, like you're spending money on a voice and they're spending money on a person. Like that doesn't really make sense as like a long-term way to do things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think. Well, okay, so I'll talk about the specific application that we're targeting, and then maybe I'll kind of talk about something that I think will happen more broadly. In revenue cycle management, again, you have these third party RCM companies as well as these in house billing teams that a health system or a large provider org might have. The goal ultimately is to obtain reimbursement from insurance companies primarily for services that have been rendered. So you've got, a big backlog of claims, for example, that you're working through. You don't know the status of them in the payer system, or, when they'll get paid or if they'll get paid. So a lot of the work does end up being phone based to, get in touch with the payer and ultimately, interact again with voice to obtain some unstructured data that is not readily available for programmatic access to the payer system. So there is a standard EDI, electronic data interchange standard, specifically the ANSI X12 EDI standard. And this, they initially started building it in 1979 and they kind of codified it in 1981. And it really hasn't changed much since then. So, I mean, well, there's a committee, that kind of adapts it, and there have been, some updates and improvements, of course, over time, but it still leaves a lot of data in, kind of an irretrievable format without a phone call. So I think this is a really interesting, example of the need to transact unstructured information in a way that is not horribly efficient. And in this case, I'd say the phone call, which is, maximally inefficient.
Yeah.
So yes, I think what you point out is it doesn't make a lot of sense in the, steady state for there to be this AI that, is then getting that unstructured information over the phone from a human. We would agree. I think the big unlock, most data out there is unstructured. It's not ready for SQL. So you have to, in the absence of, a clean ETL or set of ETLs or some sort of MDM golden record, you have a lot of situations where the data is most easily transferred by putting it on a screen and then letting a call center agent look at the screen and then talk about it. Right now, with LLMs, with the proper set of integrations, you could harness the power of that unstructured data. So what we are interested in and what we see happening over time is working with payer organizations to kind of get a grasp on all of this unstructured data, then feed it to LLM powered voice agents initially, but ultimately to facilitate the exchange of this data programmatically without voice.
Yeah, I mean, what you're basically talking about is going from a system of agent to human and then agent to agent and then clearinghouse. And like there's right now, we can put an agent, we can use LLMs to slot into an existing system. But as you go, and it's already starting to happen as you're selling to the payer side of the market as well, we're going to wind up in this world where we have agent to agent communications directly. When you get to enough network density, you'll have agent to agent communication. And at that point, like, you sort of back into building a clearinghouse, to building new system for providers and payers to talk to each other, not just within the existing infrastructure of phone calls and faxes, but through APIs.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think this is the exciting pattern. I think we'll repeat it across a variety of industries. Basically, AI agents working together to handle tasks that humans probably shouldn't have to handle in the first place, which then makes everything much more efficient. I think in the healthcare context, right, the idea that 25 cents on the dollar right now are going to administrative work that humans are carrying out, and maybe we can make a massive dent, right, in that 25% over time by using AI agents to handle those tasks, which ultimately will help patients get care more quickly, make care more affordable, make the provider experience more focused on patient care to reduce things like burnout and just the general administrative hurdles that
Yeah.
are currently in place. I think this is what we're targeting in the healthcare context, but I think that this is a broader pattern that is extremely exciting across all industries currently.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of the vertical voice stuff, or even just vertical AI broadly, it slots into an existing model that people have, especially when there's an existing outsourced BPO. You can just move from one BPO to an agent, and it's just swapping a vendor. You're not even changing anything that you're doing. And obviously for you, that's like an incredible wedge to be able to generate revenue and pick up data and get customers and get into market. But it just feels like where this ends up is so much bigger and more transformative than that. Not just saying we're going to rerun the same system more efficiently, but actually eventually hit a step change in how all of this works, overall.
That's right. I think healthcare is, this very complex, dynamic ecosystem where everything is kind of done the way that it is for a reason currently. So I think kind of meeting the market where it's at, by handling the task just with an AI agent rather than the human team, but it's still the same phone-based task. And then over time, graduating from the phone-based version of this to the AI to AI, hopefully API based version of this makes a lot of sense and is a more kind of believable path to automation and
Yeah.
streamlining that administrative work.
One thing, not to brown nose too much here, but one thing that's been, I think, really cool for me in, hanging out with you now for 3 years, I think, is when you guys came in, you were really like, we're going to be super high velocity. Like, we're technical founders. We're going to ship early and often. And like, that's our advantage. And then eventually kind of running into a little bit of a wall of like dealing with a certain set of customers who, it's awesome that you have a great product. They don't necessarily buy great products, and like, one of the things that's been really cool has been seeing you really become just like so commercial. And I see your eyes light up when you're like talking about sales and dollars and customers and use cases and case studies. And I'm just curious, like, what was the process been like for you of going from engineering into, I don't know, do you even write code anymore at all? Like, just reflect back for me a second on the last couple of years, your own sort of personal experience.
Yeah. These days, definitely more focused on go to market than product. Although have been getting a lot more heavily involved in products lately because it is a little too fun to stay away from. But ultimately, what I think was the big trigger into this transition toward being a more go to market facing founder was when we were running our billing business, we became RCM experts and we started to build this tool internally and then take it to the broader market. I finally saw what it was like to have deep firsthand understanding of the problem that my customers now were facing. So then go to market work ultimately becomes this new and exciting form of problem solving, where especially if you have an important thing to say or a set of experiences that congru with what your customer is dealing with. I think then you just become a more effective problem solver, especially if you do have that technical background and experience. You can kind of bring the two together, the RCM experience and then understanding how to package up
Yeah.
and productize AI in a useful way. So that became kind of addicting, just going into a new
Yeah.
RCM company or provider or billing team and talking to them about their problems and then trying to solve them in creative ways using SuperDial. Became something that both Harrison and I got really
Yeah.
fixated on. And I think it led us to deliver a lot of exciting proof points to folks early on that has really compounded and allowed us to,
Yeah.
gain.
I mean, I could see it. You like, you sort of developed, you're a psycho. Like I saw it happen of like getting just in love with getting in front of customers and helping them figure stuff out. It was really cool. Like, advice for other technical founders as they go from being, I'm an engineer tooling around with stuff, to like, I need to be a CEO and run a company.
I've seen both ways now. One where you kind of come into a market where you don't have as much firsthand experience, like what we were doing initially when we stood up our, RCM company, having not been in the RCM space before, to then, building SuperDial with that firsthand RCM experience. I think trying to get yourself to that level of customer empathy by doing whatever you can. If there's some certification that folks have in the industry you're selling into, go get it. If there's, some way that you can build a level of, at least if you can't achieve parity with what the customer, knows and experiences, do anything that you can to try to approximate that so that you really can reframe sales as problem solving. Because I think any technical person just enjoys problem solving, and ultimately
Yeah.
sales and go to market in general just is
I like that.
it's more
I
fun,
like that
and
a
you're
lot.
better problem solving if you a better problem solver if you actually have the experience set or the prereqs required to take the class in the first place.
Yeah. Last thing before we wrap it up here, someone who wants to join SuperDial, who do you want, and like, why should they come and join you?
At SuperDial, we test first and foremost for caring about fixing problems that real customers are facing. So this customer obsession, customer empathy for any role ultimately becomes kind of the main criteria that we are testing for. And you've got to really care about the broader thing that we're doing, which is trying to bring efficiency to the healthcare system, which is, of course, needless to say, not as efficient as it could be. So that's kind of the main thing. The other thing is just kind of having an owner's mindset in all things. I think that we are a very collaborative organization. We've recently returned to office after having been remote before. That's been a huge boon to our team and kind of our ability to execute and iterate quickly. But everyone here feels empowered and excited to own really big parts of the broader problem that we're solving day in, day out. So that's really what we test for as well. And I think in general, most folks who want to join a startup have that sort of an inclination in the first place, but it matters a lot, especially when you're moving as quickly as we are, because when you're rapidly growing the business and scaling the team, people's responsibility sets explode. And if that's something that a person wants to have happen, then great, you'll succeed here. And if not, then maybe it's not as fun of a place.
Maybe not. Well, as someone who has seen your responsibilities explode and seen you and your team rise to the challenge over and over and over again, I am super excited to be, I think, tripling down. This is the third time we've invested in SuperDial. So really excited to be tripling down on the business here. Let's fucking go, baby. Let's change healthcare.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Yoni.
If you like this and you want to hear more of this, I have a weekly newsletter on Substack. It's 99D on Substack. I'm on Twitter at Rechtman. So if you want to hear more of this, if you want to tell me why I'm wrong, or better yet, you want to tell me why I'm right, flattery will get you very far. Find me on the internet. I'm very easy to find and talk to.